release of the new What's Your Story book, The Arts in the Allegheny Highlands. This is the 6th book in the What's Your Story series, and it's a real shift for us. Most of the books prior to this one have been mainly words, stories, in fact. This book is rich with design, with color, with art, exactly what it should be, given its topic. This is also the first What's Your Story book that's been laid out and designed by our photographer, Chuck Alvarez. He did a beautiful job on it. He took all the photographs of the artists and their work and really did the lion's share of the work on this book. So would you join me in giving Chuck a round of applause? Chuck also put together the presentation you're going to see tonight before we go downstairs. And it's equally beautiful as volume 6 of the book is. Gail Hillert was also really important to producing this book. She did some of the artist interviews. She put together several of the stories of the founders of the arts that we did. And thank you, Gail, for making this book come together. So tonight, before we go downstairs, we're going to show you a few pages from each of the previous What's Your Story volumes, and then leaf through the new book on our screen, leaf through it, so that you can see what's waiting for you downstairs. You're all invited to the underground after the presentation, where you can buy copies of all of the What's Your Story books that we've produced thus far, all 6. The Dabney S. Lancaster volume is a little bit limited in number, but if you get down there really quickly, maybe you can get one. All right, which is now, of course, Mountain Gateway. So let's go ahead and start the slideshow. Our first book was on the Historic Masonic Theatre, and it came out to coincide with the reopening of the theater. What we did is, tonight we have included 3 portraits of 3 of our storytellers. So the first one, you all know Wilma McClung. She had a wonderful story to go along with her portrait, and just a little quote from what she said. She said, "The theater created happy times for so many people. I always stood by the doors to greet people and say goodbye to them. We have been given a diamond in the rough, and now it's been brought back to all its former glory. The theater will go on, and we're going to see to it that it does." George Jenkins, that many of you know him, he tells stories about what it was like to be here in the old days. When I was a kid, my mother would give me a couple dollars and drop me off at the theater. I'd buy a movie ticket for 50 cents, and I had plenty of money left over for candy, popcorn, soda, while watching the same 2 movies over and over and over again. Now listen to this, this is so beautiful. When I was watching movies, I had no concern for worldly things. I had no worldly worries. I was at home, and I felt free. Gretel Anderson. When my sister and I went to the movies, we had to sit upstairs. We'd buy our tickets at the regular theater booth, and then we had to walk around the outside of the theater and take the metal steps, the fire escape, and then we had to sit upstairs. Later in my life, that bothered me, to always have to go outside and go up the fire escape and sit upstairs. And when the theater was integrated, I remember it felt so good. I could sit downstairs, and now the theater's reopening is good for the whole town. The reopening is a wonderful thing. Okay, the second book we did is on the C&O Railway. You all know who that is. Alan Hickman went to work for the C&O Railway in 1936, and he stayed for 43 years. He said to me, "I've got cinders in my blood." Railroading was dangerous work, he said. A number of people were killed during the years at the machine shop, but we were well cared for with Coca-Cola machines and other nice things. We worked 3 shifts and we walked to work using the tunnels. 5 flights of stairs, 101 steps. He had them counted. And then he got a little philosophical about his life, and he said, "I'm 98 years old. I ride a stationary bike and I walk 10 to 12 blocks a day. I keep going. And this is what I tell people. Don't worry about anything because it's going to happen otherwise. Live as best you can and enjoy life up to the last." And I think if you know Alan, knew Alan before he passed away, that is exactly what he did. Jerry Mansfield. He talked a lot about the coming of diesel engines to Clifton Forge. Working for the railroad was the best paying job you could have in this area. Everyone was dependent on the railroad and everyone cared about it. I remember in 1951, the diesel engine started coming to Clifton Forge. First you'd see them once a week, and then twice a week, and then every other day. At the time, the coming of the diesels meant nothing to me, but it should have. Diesel engines don't have flues, and jobs began to be cut. When I returned from school in June of 1952, hundreds of men had been laid off from the Clifton Forge yards. Libby Berger. I bet Libby's here tonight, right? I hear her chuckling. Good. Okay, that's wonderful. So I should let her come up and introduce herself, but she is the daughter of a railroad man and a teacher. And Libby received her training as a registered nurse through the C&O hospital. And this is one of the stories she shared. "I worked for the C&O my whole life, my whole career, 33 years doing obstetrics and labor delivery. We had the time to spend with our patients, and we gave it our all. I remember so clearly a patient that I had training at the University of Virginia Hospital. A young girl, she was critically ill. I sat and I talked to her and I combed her hair. And years later, I found out that I was working with her. Kathy Hall was her name. We learned the gift of presence." All right, book number 3, Green Pastures. Green Pastures, as you may know, was reopened in 2021 by Governor Ralph Northam, and since then has sort of sat latent. Recently, the town of Clifton Forge was very fortunate to receive a $217,000 grant from the Monuments Across Appalachian Virginia group at Virginia Tech, sponsored by the Mellon Foundation. And that is going to allow us to put up a 7-marker walking path out at Green Pastures, an interpretive path with benches, so that folks can sit and be in this place. And also, here in the Historic Masonic Theatre, we are able to have a playwright from Lynchburg, Royal Cherie, write a play about Green Pastures. So you will have the benefit and the gift of seeing a play, a stage reading about Green Pastures. So, Atula Clark Moore, most of you know her. She was the niece of Reverend Hugo Austin, who was instrumental in establishing Green Pastures during the Jim Crow era. He went to the NAACP, pressed for a place where blacks could go to recreate safely with their families. Here's what she said. "When they integrated the park, the name was changed. And when you change a name, you lose an identity. I'd love to see it reopened under the name Green Pastures and be a park for all the people." Keep in mind, this was well before 2021. that we wrote this book. It won't be Disney World, but it'll be somewhere for people to go to enjoy the quiet, the beauty. When I was a child, I thought it was so very large. When I go back now, I see how small it was. But this small area, we could call it our own. Lily Thomas Hughes recalls her uncle, Robert Buck Burrell, talking about building the bathhouses at Green Pastures as part of the Civilian Conservation Corps. So she told us wonderful stories about what it was like to listen to his stories, talking about what it meant to him to be out there, knowing he was building structures for Black people to be safely ensconced and recreate. She said, we'd put out our food on the shelter tables, we shared everything with everyone. And in the 1980s, it broke our hearts to see it all overgrown. The sand had grass in it. I grew up there. My 10 kids grew up there. But my grandchildren went to Douthit. I'm glad I've got the memory of Green Pastures. I'm just waiting to take my great and my great-great-grandchildren there. Youth of Patricia Davis Ross. Her earliest memories of Green Pastures included her father's pickup truck, which was transportation for dozens of kids, leaving Clifton Forge and going out to Green Pastures. So he just ran a little trolley service back and forth. She said Green Pastures was a chance to have a meal, to be together as a family, and socialize. It was a day of being together. The last time I visited the park was August 2017 with Dr. McClinton. It was emotional, difficult to see how run down things had gotten. My father would be so happy about the effort to rebuild Green Pastures. All right. Volume 4, Dabney S. Lancaster Community College, now known as Mountain Gateway. We have the first photo is of Bill Wilson, who I'm sure most of you are familiar with. He remembers with a great deal of respect working with the late Dr. Jack Beckles to bring the National Guard Armory to the campus of Dabney. This is a perfect example of what the What's Your Story book project can do. It allows people to save the stories that matter so much, especially after folks pass away. This is what Bill shared. Dabney offered land to for the Armory building, and Jack and I went before the House of Delegates Appropriation Committee and said, we've got a deal you can't refuse. Doesn't that sound like Bill Wilson? Yeah. If you give us the money for this building, you not only will help the National Guard, but you'll help the college, and it'll be available for public events. They gave us the money, and we got the building built. And then he said, the college is the lifeblood of this community. That's not just a catchphrase. That's what it is. Leonard Stewart Jr., at the time the book was written, was an adjunct instructor and program head of the Administration of Justice program at the college, and this is what he shared. I hope to make a difference going forward. I have an opportunity to shape the mind of someone who may be in uniform and has to make a decision when they run into someone who looks like me. I'd like to make sure diversity happens, a diverse presence in the course, as well as in the instructors. This is Angie Graham. She worked her way up at Dabney to become the Vice President of Finance and Administration at the college, and this is what she shared with us. I graduated with honors from Allegheny High School in 1992, and I was the first generation high school graduate in my family. When I went to Dabney, I'd work until midnight at Burger King, and then I'd have to get up to be at an 8 o'clock class at the college. I remember all the support from faculty and staff when I was a student, and to me, this is what the American dream is all about. Everyone has an opportunity to succeed, no matter where they started in life. or where they are in their lives. All right. No, we're not skipping this one. I heard that.